Hey guys, this is going to be a pretty short coloring guide. We only have a few slides. Of course, anatomy of the brain is quite complex. We are going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to go a little bit deeper in lecture, but in lab we'll keep it fairly basic. So let's go ahead and start labeling the lobes. We'll label the frontal lobe in this pinkish reddish color. It's a pretty large lobe. Goes all the way to the central sulcus, which is this line here, and then all the way down to the lateral fissure. There it is, frontal lobe. Behind it, directly behind it, is the parietal lobe. Now this is just a drawing, so there's a little room for gray area here, but that is the parietal lobe behind the frontal lobe. And then let's jump down to occipital, because behind the parietal lobe is the occipital lobe here. And then lastly, we have the well, I shouldn't say lastly, there's one more, but here's the temporal lobe. And then you can't see it in this drawing. I'll see if I can post a picture that shows it better. But in between these frontal and parietal lobes and the temporal lobe, in this fissure right here, called the lateral fissure, if we were to pull the temporal lobe inferiorly, we would see that there's more gray matter, more brain tissue, more cortical tissue inside that fissure, and we would label that the insula. We can't see it though. So now let's take a look at gyri and sulci. A gyrus is a raised area of cortical tissue, whereas a sulcus is a valley or a wrinkle. So, this here, I wouldn't draw this, but this here would be a gyrus. The wrinkle next to it would be a sulcus. The valley next to it would be a sulcus. So let's name a couple gyri. We're now looking at a sagittal view, so we can name them here, and we'll probably jump back a slide and name them there as well. So the precentral gyrus is in front of what's called the central sulcus. So let me color this in. That is the precentral gyrus. Our artist, one of my former TAs, we don't have a TA anymore, unfortunately, but in front of this dark black line there, that's the central sulcus. In front of that is the precentral gyrus. We can label it here too. I had started to label it in blue. So this is the precentral gyrus here. The cingulate gyrus is a gyrus that wraps around another structure called the corpus callosum. Okay, so let me outline the cingulate gyrus. There we go, that's the cingulate gyrus. Okay, we cannot see that on this view, it's just on the sagittal view. We have the postcentral gyrus. So if you remember, we had the precentral, we also have a postcentral. So this is the postcentral gyrus right there. And it's also visible here. It's behind the central sulcus. It's tough to draw with the mouse, but and then now we have the we put cingulate twice, just illustrating that half of the cingulate gyrus is on the frontal lobe and half of it is on the parietal lobe. So that's what this black line here is showing you. It's delineating, it's part of the central sulcus, it's delineating the parietal and frontal lobes. So you can see a part of the cingulate is on the frontal and a part is on the parietal. Let's look at subsulci. So the first we've already referenced quite a few times. It's right there, the central sulcus. It's a very large sulcus, and it also extends all the way down to the lateral fissure. So that's how you can tell it apart from some of the other ones, because you see it goes all the way to the lateral fissure. There it is. I'm trying to make it a little bit bolder. So that's central. And then we have the lateral, which is often called the lateral fissure, but it's sometimes called the lateral sulcus as well. And here it is in orange. So the central sulcus is the sulcus that drops all the way down to the lateral sulcus. Then we have the cingulate sulcus. So that is around the cingulate gyrus. So let's use, I guess, pink. And this sulcus that outlines the cingulate gyrus is the cingulate sulcus. Pretty commonsensical. Makes sense. And then lastly, we have the corpus callosum, which isn't a gyrus or a sulcus, but it is on the slide. The corpus callosum is actually a commissural tract. What that means is it's white matter, which means axons, that run from one half of the brain to the other. That's what commissural means. It's made up of commissural fibers, fibers that run from one side of the brain to the other. That color is pretty similar. I apologize to the cingulate. But anyway, this is it, the corpus callosum. I'll show you guys this on the real on the brain animation as well. It's a little easier to see. So let's check out the diencephalon and midbrain. The word diencephalon, if you see that word, think thalamus. It's made up of 3 components. We can only see 2 here, that's why there's only 2 listed, but all 3 of those components have the word thalamus in it. We have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. Okay, so let's go ahead and label those. So let's label the thalamus, I guess, in green. Now, our artist has done a very good job drawing the thalamus. It doesn't always look so clear. And I'm going to add a structure to your notes. Apologies if you would just add, well, I suppose I can do it. How do I get out of drawing? Oh, here we go. I'm going to add interthalamic adhesion. Okay. You guys are seeing how the hot dog is made right now. You're behind the scenes. Okay, so there is the thalamus in green. Let's do orange and outline this little dot right here, which is the adhesion point between the 2 hemispheres of the thalamus, because we're looking at just one half of the brain right now. This is a sagittal view. So we'll label the interthalamic adhesion orange and the thalamus green. The hypothalamus is, you guessed it, below the thalamus. It's right here. It kind of has a forked look. I'm having a hard time with my mouse getting this, but yeah, there it is. It's all of this region below the thalamus, but not including this structure here, which is the pituitary gland. And that is that. There's a space here for some reason. Odd. It won't go away. But the pons in the medulla oblongata in the midbrain are all sorry guys. So the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla are all a part of the brain stem. So these top structures here were a part of the diencephalon. The midbrain pons and medulla are a part of the brainstem. So let's just go ahead and highlight those really quick. Okay, so the midbrain is below the diencephalon, and it includes a variety of interesting structures like the corpora quadrigemma and some peduncles and all different sorts of things that we will probably talk a bit about in lecture, but we don't go too heavy. Below the midbrain, we have the pons. The pons is mostly conduction tracts, but there are some nuclei in there that do some different things. And again, we'll talk about that in lecture. So there's the pons. And below the pons, we have the medulla oblongata. Oh boy. And if you've ever seen Waterboy with Adam Sandler, you know what the medulla oblongata does. If not, we'll talk about it in lecture as well. So there it is, medulla oblongata. So that's your brainstem, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Above your brainstem, you have your diencephalon, which is your thalamus, hypothalamus, and you can't see it here, but there's a small gland called the epithalamus as well. And that is it for the diencephalon. And even I made the goof I didn't want to make. That's it for the diencephalon and the brainstem. Let's go ahead and quickly just outline the cerebellum. The cerebellum has its own structures as well, but we are just going to identify the location of the cerebellum. It's like a whole other auxiliary brain. It has two hemispheres, it has gray and white matter. It's pretty interesting. So don't mix up your purples here. So here we have the cerebellum. All right. Now let's look at the cranial nerves. So the cranial nerves are borderline impossible. I shouldn't say that. But on a real brain, if we were in lab holding a real brain right now, it's very difficult to find all 12 cranial nerves. Depending on the age of the brain, how long we've been storing the brain, how well the blood vessels, whether or not the blood vessels have been removed, what the dura mater is like, with the so there's quite a bit of little blood vessels and stuff that makes it pretty difficult to discern. We can typically find 4 or 5, no problem, but finding all 12 is pretty hit or miss sometimes. So fortunately, we will be using some software that will make it very easy for us in the videos to come. But let's label them here as well. So olfactory is the only one that's kind of cut off. So we'll have to look at that at the model. So we're going to skip olfactory. Optic, I'm trying to match the colors of the drawing as best I can, is right here. There's optic. Oculomotor, looks like they picked maybe a reddish. There's the oculomotor nerves. Trochlear is interesting, cranial nerve 4. It is unique in that it looks like it's coming from back behind, and it is, it doesn't just look, back behind these cerebral peduncles there. So it's kind of coming around the corner. So we'll put trochlear. Trigeminal is the easiest to identify on a real brain. Well, that and olfactory and optic, but it's coming out of pons. So this is cranial nerve 5, trigeminal. Sticks right out of pons like little horns because it's cut, of course. This would normally be going to innervate muscles in your face and around your mouth. Abducens, they did in purple as well, it appears. So here's abducens. That moves your eyes laterally. I should have been mentioning what each of these does, so we'll start over real quick. So olfactory, this is what converts your olfactory bulbs, which sit in your cribriform plate in your skull, convert chemical particles in the air entering your nasal pathways into electrical signals called action potentials, which are transmitted to your brain and interpreted as smell. Optic does the same thing for light entering your eyes and hitting your retina. Oculomotor nerve moves your eyeballs in certain directions. So it moves them in, down, and up. In, down, and up. So it would move, if you look to the left, it'd be moving your right eye in. The abducens nerve in that case would be moving your left eye out. So it's kind of interesting how that all works. Trochlear nerve innervates a very specific muscle in your eye that allows you to look up and in, or down and in. Trochlear nerve. Trigeminal innervates various muscles in your face, and it also does some sensation to your face, I believe. Abducens moves your eyeballs out. Facial is sensation to the face only, I believe. There could be some motor innervation. I'm not positive. I apologize. Vestibulocochlear brings in signals from your cochlea and your semicircular canals, which give you a sense of your body's movement in space if your eyes are closed. If you've ever been car sick or seasick, it may be because you were looking at your phone and your eyes were telling you that you were stationary, but your vestibular system was telling you that you were moving, and that conflict can cause nausea. Glossopharyngeal innervates various muscles of swallowing around your pharynx. Vagus is that you could write a book about vagus. So you have a whole plexus in your digestive system that innervates. It goes to your heart. It does all sorts of things. Accessory nerve allows you to shrug your shoulders. It's kind of funny. It innervates portions of your trapezius muscle. And the hypoglossal nerve is what allows you to move your tongue. Anyway, so sorry for that interruption. So facial, they did like a pink. There it is. Facial nerve. Vestibulocochlear is maybe a yellow. Now in a quiz, I want you to say vestibulocochlear, not 8, please. I know that's a little obnoxious, but glossopharyngeal. Oh, this is wrong here. This is 11. It should be 9. I'll try to fix that before I upload it. They did a kind of, I guess, a plum. There it is, cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal. Vagus is just this little nerve here, but it does so much. Vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. Oops. Sorry about that poor artwork there. Accessory is almost like an orange color. You get the idea. Spinal accessory, you'll see it written sometimes as well, spinal accessory nerve. It's a cranial nerve though, so it's a little confusing. And then lastly, in a light blue, we have the hypoglossal nerve. You guys know the hypoglossal canal that this nerve ultimately passes through. Now you're actually seeing the origin of the nerve here. Cranial nerve 12. These two here are part of a different plexus, so they aren't part of the 12 cranial nerves. So there you have it, the 12 cranial nerves. So let's do this. I'll get this uploaded, and I'm going to record another video right now of these same structures on a much more higher quality 3D app that you guys know from last quarter, and I will see you in that video. Thanks, guys.